The Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast is proudly sponsored by New Vision.
My team, Conda, power. I love the power. I love the power.
Hi guys, and welcome to the first Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast for 2016. Once again, we're coming to you live on Port Fan Radio. I'm your host, Macca 19, and joining us for this off-season special is Fishing Rick. How are you, mate?
Mate, how you going?
He's back.
I feel like it's been so long. And I reckon for those who were missing my chair, it's back. I'm not in the pool.
Great. Well, at least you got your clothes on, I hope.
Well, that's debatable. I can tell you, I'll send you a picture later.
Oh, please don't.
Big fella.
Please don't. You've sent me them before and they're very scary, so... And also joining us as co-host on the podcast is Portia.
Hello. I tell you what, I'm gutted. David Bowie. That's terrible news.
It is
the worst
horrible
news of the week, really. As bad as all this AFL stuff is.
It's not good. Not good at all.
No.
And also Lady Gaga winning an Oscar was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, how did...
Oscar?
Oh, not
Golden Globe.
How did that happen?
I know. I didn't even know she was acting. So
I enjoyed the Facebook post today where it was a photo of Justin Bieber going, bad news, he's still alive.
No, I did see that.
Pretty harsh.
That is very harsh.
Yeah, what's wrong with the Biebs? I mean, he's the tool, but, you know, that's not enough reason to want someone to die, surely.
The world needs a few tools.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think it's just inevitable.
It does.
There's plenty of those at Essendon, apparently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great segue, guys. I guess it would have been nicer to do an off-season special in happier circumstances, I guess. But before we get into the reason behind this podcast, I've got to say a big Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you both. How was your holidays?
I haven't had one yet. I'm having it in a couple of weeks' time.
There you go.
Nice. I had a week off and then I'm back into it. But the holidays was good. Enjoyed the pool and went away for a bit and refreshed and recharged and ready for a massive 2016.
That's it. Good Christmas?
Nah.
Yeah. You've got the family, Macca, I reckon, to have a good Christmas because your kids are young. It creates enthusiasm. When your kids are 18 plus, the enthusiasm's just not there anymore. They don't really care. They just want a present and then hang out with their friends. So,
spot on.
Yeah.
No, my family's never been pro-Christmas. We used to joke, not that long ago now, that we were the carbon offset house for all the Christmas lights everywhere else.
That's it. I like it. You're right. My eldest is at the age now where he gets really into Christmas, so it was great to see the kids have such a great time. Me, I had gastro halfway through Christmas and ended up yakking my guts up for about 12 hours. So
nice work.
So it was a very Merry Christmas for me indeed.
I experienced that in 2009, and my lovely wife actually vomited that much that she threw it back out and had to go to hospital. It was it was a great Christmas, and it was one of those parties where you're at the party, you weren't really enthusiastic about being there anyway, and you start eating all the food, and then one of the people across from the table go, "Oh, by the way, I've got gastro," and then someone else goes, "Yeah, I've got gastro too." And then I'm like, well, what the hell are we doing here? And I said, Mel, walk away from the nuts. But by then it was too late, and we all went down with a bullet very fast.
Wow. You can do it, put your back into it, eh?
Well, if you're going to do it, you do it right.
Exactly. Right? That's it. Might as well go to town.
Awesome.
Well, let's talk about the circumstances behind today. The Court of Arbitration for Sport released their report and announced their findings this morning, banning the Essendon 34 until November 2016, which includes 12 current Essendon players, one Western Bulldog, a Melbourne St Kilda player, and of course our own two Port Adelaide players in Angus, Monfries and Paddy Ryder. The CAS overruled the verdict from the AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal after Ryder appealed the not guilty verdict last year. This obviously has major repercussions across the AFL, but let's obviously look at our own club first. Paddy and Gus out for the year. Let's not beat around the bush. This is a massive blow to the club.
Yeah, I think that Gus we could cover. I don't think anyone would be overly concerned, and that's not to say he's not a good player, but it's just that we have players in our depth that can potentially cover that. But Ryder out is just a huge loss. He's our clear number one ruckman. And we have not got a lot of depth in that position on the list, not as pure ruckman anyway. And so we're really going to be relying on a guy that was playing SANFL for a big chunk of last year as our number one ruckman this year. So it's a huge on-field hit. Obviously, even at this time of year, it's a huge on-field hit because Ken Hinkley and his guys have had the whole Christmas, New Year's period where they've been planning out their strategies for the coming year, and now that's all completely pointless. So that's a double hit, really, in that respect, on-field. And it's hard to see what we'll do to compensate at this point.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they had some contingencies in place in terms of tactics and structure. Because, look, I mean, everyone knew that this might have been coming. I don't think many people really expected it to be a 12-month penalty. I think a lot maybe thought there'd be some sort of backdating and maybe time served, and it might end up being sort of 3 or 4 rounds or something like that. But I'm not sure many people really expected a full season.
No, I don't think so. What's interesting is through the restriction of them playing, it creates opportunities for others, doesn't it? And I wonder if Big Billy Frampton, that forward's a big fan of, and I've heard from some sources close to the club that he's going great guns, that he might get an opportunity in the ruck this year.
Look, he might. We've certainly had, obviously, back in the 2000s with Primus being injured and Brendan Lade breaking his leg twice, I think it was. We've had opportunities for young ruckmen to come in before and make a mark, and everything we've heard about Frampton's been good. So he could come in and he could be quite serviceable. I think that main infield impact might be that we don't... we approach stoppages differently. So last year we were seeing Ryder really win some clear taps going our way, so really hit it down the throat of our players, and maybe we just can't expect that now, so we have to be planning to shark more than be the aggressor. So, and if we're doing that, then we can fit in Frampton potentially as a ruck, I would think. Yeah.
A lot of people write off Frampton and saying, well, he's only in his second year, he's only 19 years old, we can't expect him to sort of do anything at AFL level. But, I mean, there's plenty of examples of young ruckmen making a name for themselves at AFL level and even going deep into finals. I mean, I look at Brisbane in 2002, Jamie Charman, who I think was in his second year and only 19 years old, led their ruck for pretty much the whole season. And he played in a premiership the year after that as well. So there are examples of clubs winning premierships if their main ruckmen do go down and they have to rely on their second stringers.
Yeah, I think Jamie Charman's a bit of a special exception though, because that midfield had 4 Brownlow medalists in it. So that's a bit of a jump from where we would currently rate ourselves, I think. But by all reports,
but we got Johnny Butcher in our team, so Johnny Butcher, Jason Ackermanis. I'd pretty much pick Butcher, I reckon.
Yeah, maybe. If it was to get along with his teammates, then definitely you pick John Butcher.
Absolutely, go the Butch. We had to bring up Butcher at some point. So
the Butch. I reckon he's in for a big year this year.
I hope so.
Well, this also opens up the opportunity for Butcher to maybe get some more game time, because certainly looking at it on face value with Ryder, Dixon, Schultz, Westhoff, it was going to be pretty hard to see where Butcher was going to get a game unless we had some massive sort of injury issue. But now it might open the door for Johnny to come in and play some decent footy again.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's linked to the ruck spot though. I think it's probably just linked to how well Jay Schultz goes for the most part. So I haven't heard anything about his pre-season, how he's doing or what's going on there. But I mean, if he's on a 1-year contract, which means we probably think he's not got a lot left in him. And if that's the case, then there's plenty of opportunity for Butcher to come in and make his mark for sure. And with Dixon still on the side as well.
Or is it just going to sort of facilitate our running game plan? Because we'll probably just go with Schultz, Dixon and Westhoff as our first 3. And with Lobe as the standalone ruck, which is sort of the 2014 model that worked so well.
Yeah, I think that if you're rucking to Lobby and potentially Frampton, then I wouldn't expect that we would necessarily decisively win a lot of clearances. So that means we'll probably need to have a lot of numbers around the ball, and we'll need to really work on how we clear from clearances. And our midfield's coming along really nicely. Ollie Wines is looking like a beast. We've got Brendan Archie, who's apparently still progressing well. We unlocked some real good midfield depth last year, so that's probably going to play into that, I think, more than anything, rather than the running from half-back style. I think that we have a potential to be sort of just sharking the taps and clearing through traffic, and then hopefully getting on the front of a leading key forward. So it'll probably be looking a lot more like the old power from 2002, 3, 4, where a lot of our play just came straight out the middle rather than relying on a halfback repelling, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, let's go through the AFL's press conference today. Essendon are allowed to upgrade their 5 rookies, as well as being allowed to recruit 10 new players to the club. It's really the other clubs that have got the shit sandwich in this situation, as we can only upgrade rookies to replace the players that we've lost. So we get to go into a hopeful premiership year 2 players short in our squad, which is pretty pathetic. Not only that, but Essendon will receive no new penalties for this guilty verdict. Now, given the AFL made it pretty specifically clear in their original findings that the penalties were for poor governance and not for doping, I think this is again a pretty pathetic decision by the AFL. I think it's weak, it's gutless, it lacks conviction, and is pretty much a kick in the teeth to the other clubs in the AFL.
And what would you have wanted?
I would be expecting more draft penalties. I think I don't believe Essendon should be getting pick 1 if they happen to finish last. I think that's going to just be a terrible situation. They shouldn't be rewarded with getting the best player in the draft because they chose to run a legal doping structure at their club.
But haven't they already been penalised for that crime?
They got penalised for poor governance, poor record keeping, not for doping. So they should really be penalised for doping as well. They should be getting another fine. They should be getting draft sanctions for this as well. That's just my opinion. But
should they be allowed to remain in the competition? I ask that not to create controversy, but as a legitimate, have they disrespected the competition that much that really, regardless of their history, that it should be questioned?
I think they've got to stay in. You can't kick a team out of the competition.
You can't?
No, it would be a disaster for TV rights. It would be a disaster for, like, what do you do? Like, well, you can't have a buy.
There's a new TV rights coming up soon. Maybe Fitzroy could come back, as an example.
Yeah, well, look, the practicalities of expelling them from the competition are very hard, because then what do you do when the next club does the same thing? Because we know it's going to happen again. Like, Carlton, for example, like they'll eat up that vomit and have a go themselves and hope that they won't get penalised.
But paying people a bribe, which is ridiculously bad, is still not as bad as using human people as biological experiments in some sort of drug game to see how far you can go. I mean,
I know, but I think that's going to be the result in civil action on the basis of breach of work health safety. And I would suspect that would be coming through via the AFLPA. So they're going to get penalised, but I don't think all the penalties are going to come from the AFL. If you were going to put some penalties on Essendon that won't cripple them, but that will limit them, I don't think I'd actually punish them with draft picks, or I think I'd probably do something like restrict them so that they're not allowed to bid on restricted free agents or unrestricted free agents that haven't been delisted.
Well, could they be sued to the point where they are insolvent?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think they certainly could. Yeah, absolutely.
So then
well, then I think the AFL will step in and give them some handouts.
Yeah, basically.
And you guys are happy with that?
No, not really, but it's member
Not
on
really,
club.
but what other option is there? I mean, it happened with Carlton. They gave Carlton huge penalties. They gave Carlton huge penalties for their draft, their rigging of the draft or whatever it was that they did back in the early 2000s. And they ended up having to bail Carlton out in the end.
What if they're sued $100 million? What is
that? That would be unrealistic.
Well, is it? 32 players, loss of income for 50 years of their life, because if something adverse was to happen, stress and suffering, depending on their pay scale, even 50 million. You'd think if they're sued 50 million, which is $1.5 million per player, and it was upheld, that would almost be, surely that'd be enough to make them insolvent. And then what? Are we going to all be happy if the AFL pays them out $40 million to keep them in the competition?
I don't think the AFL would do that. I think if we are going to be looking at penalty or fines or whatever lawsuits that are going to go into that sort of high into the millions, then I think they're in a lot of trouble. But If it's going to be sort of $2, $3, $4, $5 million, then I think the AFL will step in and provide that sort of handout. But if it's heading towards the 40, 50, 60, $70 million mark, well, see you later.
Well, you'd think each player, minimum $1 million for loss of wage plus pain and suffering and future risk to their body. I'm no lawyer, but...
Well, they're still going to get paid. The players are still going to get paid, aren't they?
Well, that segues right
It's debatable.
into...
But can I just add something, first of all? Which is that I think that the AFL won't let hardly any of this get to the stage of being a legal action. I think they'll be trying to settle with almost every player that might have a dispute. And I think that'll be a joint effort from Essendon and the AFL, because obviously the AFL will ultimately be liable if Essendon goes under.
If you're a legal representative of a player, would you accept that though? Or I don't know if I would. I'd be saying I think you should be taking it to court to get as much as you could, because you might not even be able to play again.
But it depends on the circumstances of the player. So, for example, that player's still got to live for the next 3-4 years while Essendon and the AFL fight them in the courts. Maybe they'll take the money now and take what they can get and move on, because they don't want to have a long, horrible, drawn-out battle that they may possibly not win, particularly given how well-connected the AFL is. I mean, the AFL couldn't beat Ryder, but they can sure as hell beat any other Australian in the courts just by sheer weight of money and process.
I just think it's a poor tack that the AFL was taking in this. In terms of they've gone from really sort of having a big go at Essendon over this a couple of years ago to now sort of, poor Essendon, we've got to make sure that they're okay, and they're a really big club and we've got to make sure that their supporters are happy, and basically they're in damage control mode, the AFL now, because they're worried that maybe Essendon might go under, maybe their supporters will fly off the handle, maybe they'll lose 10, 15, 20,000 members or something, and they'll be in a lot of trouble. But I just don't understand how the AFL can take that sort of tack in this situation. Because they've made the AFL look like... They've made a complete mockery of the AFL, in my opinion.
Yeah, they have. I guess if we have to imagine if this was, say, North Melbourne that had done the same thing, or, I don't know, Fremantle, how strongly would the AFL stick by them? I suppose Fremantle they would, because they're doing all right, but...
Oh, if this was the Western Bulldogs, they'd be in a world of trouble. No doubt about that. If it wasn't one of the AFL's, sort of 2 or 3 glamour clubs, then, they'd be in a lot of hurt, I think.
Yeah.
So if we direct it to the 2 poor players, how's... we really disadvantaged more so over Monfries than Paddy Ryder from signing a contract and getting them into the club, really. Not from an ability. I rate Ryder a lot more, but I think, Macca, you've got some insight onto this that you wanted to share.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we knew going into the Ryder trade that this was a possibility. We knew there was a chance he'd be suspended. That was all out in the open. But the Monfries trade stings a bit for me. I had a flick through the report today, and one thing that really stood out was point 32. Which said that by September 2012, Essendon self-reported its concerns over the supplement program being used by its players to the AFL and ASADA. Now, most news reports had reported that Essendon had self-reported in February 2013. Now, to some, the response to that statement will be, well, who cares, what's the difference? But September 2012 to February 2013 is the difference between Essendon and the AFL knowing that ASADA was circling, whilst we were trying to attract Gus to the Port Adelaide Footy Club or not. So Essendon and the AFL fully knew that this could go down whilst we were trying to trade for Gus. Koshy's come out tonight and said that we didn't know about it, so we'll be seeking compensation for it, which is great. I think this is exactly what we want from the club. This is an incredibly deceitful action by both Essendon and especially the AFL, who should have flagged the trade at the time to ensure that we were given full disclosure that something like this might be happening, that ASADA was circling a player that we were trying to attract to the club. The fact that the AFL in 2012, the same off-season, put a stop to the Tippett to Sydney trade because Jesse White in the first rounder wasn't considered a commercially viable trade, yet they greenlight us trading for Gus without us knowing that there was a possibility that he would miss a season, 2 seasons, a huge amount of time. I think it's a disgrace.
Yeah, look, I think there are 2 areas for dispute. One is that one that you've mentioned already about Angus Monfries, which is absolutely, we clearly had no idea that he had this hanging over his head. And I think it's an area that the AFL very clearly need to clean up, because it's not the first time we've had, who was it, the Hawks trader that had depression to North Melbourne? Jonathan Hay?
Jonathan Hay,
a long history of depression. We had just this year Jake Carlisle already in trouble on the eve of being traded to the Saints, and Essendon didn't say anything to St Kilda. There needs to be some really real improvements in standards of disclosure between clubs when it comes to trading, and obviously this is another circumstance where there's been a team let down very clearly by the clubs not disclosing everything that should be put on the table. It's pretty dodgy. There is some possibility, like the depression case, there is some idea that perhaps there should be some privacy given to the players in these conditions. But in that case, there should be a place for trading with conditional trades, as there is in the NFL. So, for example, if you trade for a player, maybe you have to pay a first-round pick, but if they only play 2 games for the season, you get a second-round pick back the next year if they don't perform, if they don't play for whatever reason. But in this case, it's just an absolute travesty of communication, and there's legal grounds. But I think the second area is absolutely the wider investigation has come up with a result, and I think it's pretty fair for players to be suspended for this long. But the real imposition on Port Adelaide was not laid down by WADA. It's the AFL's decision on how they will handle the list management aspects of it. So what's happening is basically the entire salary cap for this year that was allocated to Patrick Ryder and Angus Monfries, we don't get to use it for anything else. It's locked up with them for no apparent reason. It certainly wasn't mandated by ASADA or WADA. It's the AFL just deciding arbitrarily to punish Port Adelaide when we could actually be putting that money towards a new contract for Ollie Wines to pay up all our other players, because the reality is that the salary cap exists to balance teams, and if we can't pay and play both Ryder and Monfries this year for something that was completely not our concern or cause, and we don't even get to communicate or train with them really during that time, then we're being horribly punished for something completely out of our control, and that's something that I think needs to be addressed very strongly. So there's multiple causes for Port Adelaide to be complaining to the AFL and to Essendon, and then of course there's also the financial implications as well.
Well said.
So if we go back to Gus, what do you think would be fair compensation for us? What should we be able to do this year to replace Angus Monfries?
I think Essendon should have to pay his salary for the year, and I think that amount of money should be opened up in our salary cap for the season as well.
I agree.
I like Portia's suggestion on the forum about being able to use the $1 million, if it's $1 million between the two players, and allocate it to another player like Ollie Wines and forward pay his contract. I thought that was a good suggestion, Portia.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really the obvious thing that we should be allowed to do in this circumstance. Basically, what I think should be happening in relation to the salary cap is that any top-up players you pay for, they come out of the salary cap. So if you don't want to take them, you don't have to. But if you do, then they come out of the salary cap. But similarly, suspended players don't come in the salary cap. And you can spend the money in that salary cap. This is the extra thing. You should be able to spend that money in the salary cap on any unsuspended players. So it could apply to Essendon too, and it's going to sound awful. But the reality is they're losing 12 players. They should have a bit of cap room to pay for top-up players and maybe sign the players that are already there, just not the ones that are already suspended. And that, I think, if you present it like that, the AFL will probably jump on board because it's actually a bit nicer to Essendon than they probably deserve, in that would enable them to at least lock down their current undrug-using players for a longer-term contract potentially, and limit the absolute exodus that we can probably expect to see at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. So where does this leave our premiership chances? We left last season pretty confident that 2016 could be our year, where we give the premiership a red-hot shot. Do we still have that confidence?
I think so. I think, not to be disrespectful to Angus, I think he's replaceable. And I think with the recruitment of Charlie Dixon, I think we still have enough tall man coverage to go the season. Obviously, if injuries occur, that could change things completely.
I think it's going to come down to how well we adapt to changing our game plan with no Ryder, and also just sheer luck of the draw. Like if Lobby goes down, then we would have Billy Frampton as our number one pure ruck at that point, and we don't know what's going to happen from there. It's just a huge chance. But if Lobby plays all season, and let's face it, he's a pretty fit guy, he should be able to. If he plays all season, then yeah, we should still be right up there, assuming we compensate for the fact that we probably can't expect the same number of, clear, direct clearance-winning taps as we might with Ryder. But if we compensate for that, we play a little bit more defensively and have smarter work in traffic, then we can. And Bobby's fit, we're fine. But if he's not fit, then we've got real problems.
For me, it essentially leaves us in a status quo position from last season. After the big recruit in Dixon, we also landed Tumpus. I thought we'd really improved our first team in depth and given ourselves a couple of great options with regards to what we can do with our tall timber. And now it leaves our ruck contingent on the knife's edge, as we've mentioned, and we're essentially back to square one. Now, square one's not a bad place to be because we've got a great squad, we've got a great fixture. We should still be able to finish high up the ladder if we're good enough, but they are two very handy players that we'll be without. And whilst we can cover Monfries, and I agree we've got a lot of options there, it would be great to see Jakey Need sort of cement his spot in the side, or maybe Carl Amon raise his game another level. There's also Tumpus, there's Aaron Young. There's a couple of other options as well. Palmer, that's right. Gus is a big game player. He's played great footy in finals. He's played great in showdowns against good opposition. He always comes to play. I think that might be a side of this which we're maybe overlooking a little bit. And whilst we think that Gus might not be a big loss, maybe he will be in those sort of precious situations.
I think that's a fair comment, but I also think our list, even with this happening, our list is probably still better suited to premiership rigours than it was last year, because we do have Dixon and we're not relying on Schultz playing a whole year. That's a huge difference. I would much rather, if we had to choose between losing number one key forward and losing a number one key ruck, I'd lose the ruck every time.
Yeah.
And we still have Johnny Butcher.
We do have Johnny Butcher.
Hey, here's a random question. If he was to kick 40 goals in this season, what would the atmosphere be like at the ground?
I think if he kicks the first goal of the year, then we'll be happy for the rest of the year.
Well, he did that this year. He did that last season.
Yeah, I know, but this year it'd be extra meaningful.
True. If he kicks 40 goals for the season, it's just going to be party central.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's going to be mosh pits in the stands, basically.
What about the game day village? It would be anarchy in that.
Yeah.
Does that still exist?
There'll be circle pits. There's going to be crowd surfers. It's going to be great. Well, I guess, look, we've succeeded through this sort of adversity before. We won the flag in 2004 when we missed Primus, our number one ruck, Franco, our number one midfielder, our number two midfielder walked out in the off-season that year. We still won the flag. In 88, our captain, Russell Johnson, missed all the finals and we still won the flag. There's a heap of examples of teams losing key players and still getting success. So I'm not too concerned at this point in time. I think it's a shame that we're going to lose two very, very good footballers for our club for 12 months. But I think the rest of our squad is still in a good position to make a decent crack at a premiership.
There is one other question, which is, do you think they'll come back?
I think yes. Well, definitely Ryder will. Monfries, I think, will offer him a 1-year deal at the end of this year.
Yeah. I was just thinking on the basis that maybe the AFL don't want to give us those concessions they actually really should. There is precedent for the sacking of Favola and Lovett, which is obviously two circumstances out of the club's control, slightly less than ours was, where they delisted Favola, but they're allowed to spread his cap amount over 2 years. Maybe we can arrange something like that with Monfries, where he'll effectively over the next 2 years get, say, whatever he was owed this year and a base wage, and then he plays next year. And that'll give us some cap relief this year that we could do stuff with at least. I don't know.
Yeah. It really depends on their contract structure as well.
It does.
Both Ryder and Monfries might be on high. They may be on high money per game sort of situations. Especially Monfries, he might be in that sort of situation where he might get $5,000 a game or something. So that immediately opens up,
well, in his fourth year, he might,
$100,000. So I guess it really depends, and I guess only the people at the club would know that. I guess the next question I've got is, how do we feel about Essendon and good old Jimmy Hurd right about now?
Boo.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is a family-friendly podcast, so I'm not going to say what I really think. But
I think I'm really kind of happy how this has ruined James Hird's reputation, and it has, let's face it. It'll annoy me if Channel 7 pick him up as a special comments commentator in 5 years' time, but they will. I think.
Well, if you can glass your wife in the face and get away with it, or partner, I'm sure you can do anything and get back on Channel 7.
But Essendon, I mean, I think that there's, regardless of anything else, the way they've dealt with trading away their players that have been under all this suspicion, and as we discussed, all the lies they've told along the way, I think that's quite disreputable. Really, and I think that every club in the league should be kind of pissed off at them, particularly some of the things that Koshy apparently said shortly before we started this podcast about how every club told Essendon to take a deal and they didn't want to do it, and how we told Ryder and Monfries to take a deal and Essendon were saying, nah, don't take a deal, and now we're paying the price. So...
Well, any respect I had for the Essendon Football Club, which was pretty minimal to start with anyway, is long, long gone. And you know what? I think James Hird should probably be in jail by the end of this year, to be honest.
Do you think it was a deliberate ploy to stretch it out as long as possible so they could churn their list to avoid complete disaster of all the bulk of their list being suspended?
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
no
definitely.
doubt about that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, it's just, from their part, it's a smart strategy, really, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Look, they've done what they've had to do. And, you know, maybe from the AFL's point of view, because Hurd's no longer there, because Little's no longer there, the president or the CEO, he also left, Dank's not there, all the people that were involved in this aren't there anymore. So maybe that's why the AFL are backing Essendon so heavily tonight, because all the people that were involved in this aren't really there. They get a clean slate and can start again. But that's what I think.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think we've had a single satisfying mea culpa moment that whole time from anyone at Essendon, realistically. Not until they've absolutely been forced to say something. It's kind of disgusting.
And I'll tell you what, if we lose to Essendon this year...
we will.
I
We will
don't know
not.
how I will recover from that.
We'll totally lose to them.
We will not.
We absolutely will. We'll lose that first game to them in round 3 or whenever it is.
Why? Because they're going to be out to prove a point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're going to be... what are they going to be doing? Rating Adelaide's under-18s to play us, and we're going to lose to that?
Yeah, well, okay. I don't know, like, there's two lines of thought. Like, one is that, yeah, the Essendon players that are still there, they'll still want to do well. But then again, John Worsfold as coach, I mean, he's the king of tanking and then premiershipping. So maybe I'm overthinking how well they're going to play. Because Worsfold does like a tank. That's the one thing we do know about him for sure.
I must admit, I'm with Macca. I don't think they deserved a number 1 draft pick at the end of this year. They should be at the end of the gravy train, I reckon.
I think they desperately need it, not because of the player quality, but just because it gives the fans something to obsess about like it does with every other shit club.
Yeah, but Essendon got 1 year of penalties, is that right? 1 year of draft penalties?
Yeah.
Carlton got 2. So what's the difference? Why is this a
years?
lesser penalty? Why is this a lesser penalty than what Carlton got? Why is Carlton's worse than systematic doping of players?
I think that the answer to that is what happened to Carlton afterwards, which is that they've been complete rubbish ever since. It was a really big hit at exactly the wrong time for them because they had an ageing list at that point and they'd already been delaying their refreshing of the list, and then to lose those draft picks at exactly the wrong time, I mean that's crippled them. They're still recovering from it, and in that time they've been recovering, they've had all sorts of problems. Like you said, they've had to be bailed out, and they're still, even now, what are they? A terrible, terrible team that no one wants to watch. And
even the Crows lost 2 years of draft picks for what they did, which was significantly less than what this is.
Yeah,
it's staggering that they're not going to get any other penalties for this.
The Crows volunteered their draft picks, if I remember correctly, or at least some of them. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think that as time goes by, the idea of draft penalties is sort of showing to not be good. I would rather see other forms of penalty. Like I said, excluding them from being able to bid on free agents, which won't directly affect them, and also potentially limiting their salary cap for a few years. Because again, if they're rebuilding, they don't need a full salary cap anyway, and they shouldn't be poaching players from other clubs. after something like that. And I think that's enough. They still get the youth to keep a bit of positivity around the club, but it also means that they can't just go around and mess with the other club like they already have and say, we're going to pay $600,000 a year for, I don't know, a player and screw up everyone else's salary cap. It'll limit them enough. I think that'd be enough of a thing to do.
Well, look, we can't leave the podcast on a sour note, so I thought what we might do is have a quick chat about the 4 announcements that the club made over Christmas. So the first 2 were Travis Boak and Robbie Gray extending their contracts by an extra year, staying with the club till the end of 2019, and you would think it comes with a bit of a rearrangement of the financials of their contract as well. I guess it seemed a little strange at the time of the announcements, but if this has allowed us to change the year-to-year financials of their contracts, possibly backloading their contracts to allow more room for newer contract renewals, then it's a very good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it probably just spaces them out over a longer period of time rather than backloading them. So if you had an extra year and then that last year you pay not much for, then it allows you to free up a bit of space every other year. So I don't know that it's backloaded, but just that the last year we're getting cheap. And yeah, they're good. They're good to get. It's nice to have those, particularly from Travis Boak. It's just nice to get that confirmation he's going to be around until, like Stephen Trigg amount of time. He'll be here forever. It's a good thing. I don't know that it was really announcement worthy, but I mean, you got to announce it, I guess.
Yeah,
I reckon it was good dedication by the players, and I'm sure that they've rejigged their contracts to assist in helping get Ollie Wines to sign on the dotted line throughout the season.
The next big news, and arguably the biggest, was that Port will be nominating to have a women's team in the National Women's AFL competition, and with that, Erin Phillips, the daughter of the great legend Greg Phillips, will be leading the charge. Your thoughts?
I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but you want to keep it short, so I won't say all of them. But I think it's a great idea. I think the AFL is uniquely placed in the world to make a women's league work. For a bunch of reasons. Number one, they control the code. So you can try and make a women's league in soccer or whatever else, but if you've got them in multiple countries, then your players can get recruited elsewhere, and that sort of dilutes it. So you might have a working women's competition in one country and then not in others. In Australia, we've only got one country. We've only got one major league, and we'll only have one women's league. So basically, you'll see the best players of Australian football in that league, and that helps enormously, certainly in terms of promoting it as well. Linking it to existing AFL clubs, people love watching football. People go and watch SANFL. They watch SANFL, or they used to watch SANFL reserves. It's all about the conflict, and giving another Port Adelaide team to barrack for, I think, is nothing but a good thing. And we've seen the AFL have actually been fairly willing to commit to this as a serious prospect. And we've certainly watching Melbourne Football Club, and I suppose the Western Bulldogs as well. They've been pretty serious about promoting the women's team as fairly equal to the men's AFL team, which is a big deal, which is an absolutely huge deal. And so I'd be really excited about it. And of course, Erin Phillips coming back, I mean, that's just the star recruit, isn't it? That's the, you can't imagine a bigger women's football recruit than Erin Phillips coming back to play for Port Adelaide. And you'd hope that'd help us get a nomination over the line for when the Women's League starts in 2017. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
She's a bloody good player too.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
I think it's good for women in AFL football, and I think it'll be like the WBBL. It's going to be a long, slow progress, but if we don't do anything, well, nothing's ever going to happen, is there? So let's get on board, and Port Adelaide's lucky enough to be one of the clubs, and it'd be great for Erin, who's followed it throughout her life and wants to follow in her dad's footsteps, and I think we would be able to field a pretty good side. So fingers crossed.
I'm all for a women's AFL team. I think this is one of the most exciting developments in Australian rules football for a long, long time. And I'm all for having another team called Port Adelaide to support in a footy competition. How the National League will be set up is going to be pretty interesting, whether or not we actually get a team in the first place. But also, how long is the season going to be? Are we going to play out of Alberton? Are there going to be curtain raisers at Adelaide Oval? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, and I think it's going to be great, and hopefully the Port Adelaide community get behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're sort of planning a way to introduce the league, I mean, what I'd like to see personally would be probably curtain raisers for most games, and then maybe one game per week of the league you might have on a Thursday night as a thing on Fox Footy. and that's your headline game every week, sort of the equivalent of Friday night football, but it's a Thursday night match between two of the teams, and that rotates week to week. I think that'll work pretty well. Be a good warm up for the weekend.
Yep.
You could still probably, I guess, if it's under the AFL format, it probably won't work. But I was thinking if we had like an early Sunday game, so it might be difficult to have a women's game. I guess they could prelude or at Alberton or something with a Magpies game, but it's a different league, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, no, not much of that.
Yeah, so it probably wouldn't work. But I'm sure we'd make it work and flexible. And I'm pretty sure even if they had a standalone game at Alberton in their own right, that they would still attract a few thousand diehard Port fans there.
Yeah. Don't know.
You reckon?
Nah, I don't think Alberton's a huge draw card for something like this. I think if you're going to do it and you're genuinely trying to get fans, you've got to play it at the proper ovals that the AFL teams play at.
Yeah, but if it was standalone, it probably wouldn't be viable, would it, really?
Standalone, it might not. Depends. Yeah. Like if you have, okay, let's say as an example, let's say we've got a standard week of football and we've got a Saturday game where Port are playing away and a Sunday game where the Crows are playing at home. Wouldn't it be nice to have a Friday night game to go to at Adelaide Oval? Yeah? You'd consider walking down from the CBD to go see that, wouldn't you?
No, well, I don't work in the CBD, so probably not, no.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, but that's the same thing as Alberton. I mean, there's more people near the CBD than there are near Alberton that would go, I would have thought.
I don't know. There's a lot of diehard Port fans that live around Alberton, obviously, so I would imagine that you'd probably you'd pick up a few of those, but you could be right. I guess we're only going to find out by trialling, aren't we? And trial and error, see what works, what doesn't. So, and that's what I mean. If the longer we wait, the longer it's going to take for the women to evolve into a professional league. So let's get it going, and let's get the power into a women's side before the Crows. Wouldn't that be lovely?
I don't care about that, but I want Port to get the first premiership. That's the main thing.
It wouldn't be just comedy gold if we could get in before the Crows could, and they're having a big sookie la-la.
That'd be very.
Well, there's another debate. Would it be stronger for the Port Adelaide Football Club, in the serious question, to field a women's side over the Crows? I mean, the Crows have a lot of SANFL followers still, and so they're sort of quasi-supporters of the Crows, or vice versa. They're sort of quasi-supporters of the SANFL. Will they have that raw, passionate following of a women's AFL side that potentially Port Adelaide could with our club-based following?
I think it really depends on how the AFL is selling it. I think they're trying to sell it as these are real clubs, and if you're trying to sell something as this is a real club, then you've got to go for Port Adelaide over the Crows every time, logically. I think that from that perspective, like if you're talking about I think the main thing is conveying the respect with which the women's game is being treated, and I think that you show that by being traditional and making sure all the big names have got a piece and that they're right up there, and then the others will fall in line. And I think the Adelaide Crows are the others, and I think Port are one of the traditional clubs that really should be represented in this sort of competition.
Macca's
well, we've got a question from Jimmy Beercans on BigFooty. Will we list 4 ruck women in the women's team?
It really depends. Like the height differential is probably not going to be as great, so you're probably more likely to get ruck forwards, I guess, and players that can play multiple positions. Because someone like the difference between someone like Sandilands and a regular AFL ruckman is like 10 centimetres. With the women's league, it's never going to be that much. So you're probably going to get a lot more part-timers, I'd imagine.
Could we recruit
played that
Lauren
with a very straight bat, Portia. I like it.
Could we get Lauren Jackson? Lauren!
Yeah, maybe. Isn't she from Canberra?
Yeah, but she's tall.
Yeah, but she played for GWS then, wouldn't she?
Moving on, and let's talk about the fourth and final announcement, which was the great news that Chad Wingard has extended his contract for another 3 years, taking him to the end of 2019.
He was off to the Hawks, Macca.
I know. I thought he was off to the Hawks, and then he was off to the Crows, and he was never going to play for Port again. But bang, 3 more years.
Jeez, what a surprise! I'm shocked.
No, it's good. It's good because it's sort of, I think it's a personality thing from Chad in that when you watch him play, like he's pretty hard-headed, and I reckon there's a few players at Port that think they've got unfinished business at this point. Obviously, the older ones definitely do. After like anyone that was still around in 2007, like they know they've still got to prove themselves a bit. But the young guys, I think, they really just want to go out and have a really good crack. And so the next 3 years for Chad Wingard is absolutely fantastic for our club. He's a gun. Hopefully, he never leaves. I imagine he's the sort of guy that'll only leave after we've had very clear premiership success, if he does. So yeah, let's get premierships at least.
Yeah,
That's it.
Well, the other one is the non-announcement of Ollie Wine's signing. Is that a concern for us, or are you guys comfortable where it's at?
Not a concern at this point.
No, look, I think that it's a pretty fair point in that I think everyone is expecting Ollie Wines to come out this year and be even better than the last 2 years. And if you back yourself in, which clearly Ollie does, and that's great because it means he's got good confidence and it means he knows he's working hard enough to get the return, then why wouldn't you back yourself in his position? He'll get even if he does his knee and goes out for the year, he'll get another contract next year. Like that's guaranteed, right? There's not. Yeah. I don't think there's an injury short of quadriplegia that would have him out at the side permanently. So he's in a strong position to take that sort of chance and then get paid on what his actual performance is. And the reality is, if he has the year that we think he's going to, which is going to be potentially all Australian, I would hope. And particularly if we're having to space around Lobby rather than Ryder, we'll need a much more fierce, contested midfield, centre square midfield to actually win clearances. Then he's in a great position to really up his price going into next contract. So yeah, good on him. I imagine probably we'll have an idea how that's going mid-season and they might start talking then.
Yep.
Macca?
I agree, 100%. It's not a concern for me at this point. I think he's doing the right thing for himself. Well, if he's not signed up by maybe August, then I might be a little bit concerned.
Yeah.
When do you think the media is going to start sparking up with all the bullshit rumours like Barrett puts out there?
Probably in about a week, I would say.
I reckon as soon as he has a facial expression that can be turned into a photograph in the Herald Sun that looks like he's not happy with what's going on. So round 2. Yeah.
So when we lose a game and he's walking off the ground, head in hands, debating his life at Alberton, that'll be the headline.
Or he's shouting another player.
In the end, it was only that he got like 15 touches and he should have got 30 or something.
So if we have a poor season, do you think we might be at risk of losing him?
No, I don't think that matters at all.
No?
I don't think it's got anything to do with it. I think it's going to come down to money, which may not sound great for maybe Ollie, I guess. But I think it might come down to money. I think he's going to wait and see what he can get. I think other clubs are going to offer massive, massive contracts to him. And he's going to see what he can get and whether Port can match it. And if Port can go close, then he's going to stay.
I think he would. I don't think money is as big a factor. I mean, I think it's a big factor, and if there's a huge blow us out of the water bid, then he might have a look at it. But I think mostly it's just going to come down to personality and how he's treated. So as long as we keep Ken on and he doesn't have a complete personality flip and our midfield coach doesn't piss him off or whatever else, and the players aren't all dicks or anything like that, then I think he'll hang around if the money's even vaguely near what he's being offered elsewhere. And if he feels we're real close to a premiership, he'll probably stay even if it's kind of shit.
What's his next contract worth? $1 million a year? Is he that good?
I think someone will offer that. I don't think we can afford that. I think we might be able to afford maybe 700.
If Chad's on 600, hypothetically speaking, would that be destabilising to try and keep Ollie and offer him 800?
I
don't think it matters.
I think we have a unique position in that we can see what he's actually worth before we commit. So if you're Richmond, because we know they're going to bid, or any other Victorian club saying, hey, Ollie, we're going to give him $1 million, they're going to have to start saying that now. Like, they're going to have to start saying that right now. Because if they're not starting that conversation now, then they're going to miss out. Whereas we can sort of get a track of where he's going. We can discuss it with him and say, hey, look, you're doing pretty well. We're willing to offer you blah, 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 but we know your best years are ahead of you. And alternately, if he does perform really well, we'll say, yeah, we'll pay $1 million a year because you are that important to us. So that's a huge advantage for us to be able to do that, where other clubs have to come out with the big numbers. We've done the big numbers before. That's, why Monfries got $500,000 a year. Not necessarily based on the tail end of the season, but because we started talking early. So it's highly likely that there will be overbids from clubs. but how real they are is questionable. Well, I can't remember. There was one this year, this trading period, where there was apparently a huge bid for a player by someone, and the money wasn't actually there. Who was it? What player was it? I forget. Anyway, yeah. So there'll be mischievous bids at the very least.
Yeah.
And can I just say, fantastic podcast planning, Macca, that we do a quick 20-minute podcast tonight.
As always, it's worked out well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys, for joining in this impromptu podcast. Would have been nicer talking under better circumstances, but I think we had a bit of fun anyway. Look, I'm still super bloody excited to see what we can do, and if anything, this should really make us more focused to come out and kick ass.
We'll be fine. Don't panic.
Have faith in Butcher and Dixon is what I say.
Yeah, absolutely. Big Dick's going to have a great year.
He is. Did you see that photo that was on BigFooty where he was standing next to Elipati Carline and made him look like he was Jarman Impey? It was insane how big he is, that guy. Wow.
He is going to have a massive year. And look, to be honest, big call by Rick here. I actually think he's more important to us than Paddy Ryder. So
yep, agree.
If we lost Dixon and Ryder, that would be massive.
Oh, yeah.
And that would be a huge blow for us. So hopefully Dixon doesn't get injured and he's only rested by our choice. But outside of that, I think, like I said earlier, drafting Dixon, I reckon he's going to be the man. It wouldn't surprise me if he stays fit, if he kicks at least 60 goals for us this year, if we're delivering like we should do.
Yeah. I have hopes he's going to be our Barrier Hall at the Swans.
That would be good. Just quickly, why are the Crows supporters all arcing up today? Like, are they premiership favourites now or something?
Nah.
Let them have their fun. Honestly, if the shoe was on the other foot, we'd be doing the same thing.
So they're laughing at us because we lost two players.
Yeah.
So they're savouring someone else's misery. Is that what you're saying?
Indeed.
Yeah, we lost two players for a year. I mean, we're clearly
Yeah.
not doing it right. We should be doing it like them and losing players to other clubs forever, like Dangerfield.
Okay, so quickly
Bang.
before we go, I know I'm just stretching this out now.
are, Rick.
Who are we going to elevate from the rookie list?
Well, Cracker and Mitchell.
Really?
Who?
I don't. I
You don't
elevate
think
Cracker and I leave it open still. I don't know. I leave two senior spots until we actually need one of them. Because I reckon Snelling might be ahead of Mitchell by the end of the year.
Well, I wonder if this means we have 3 spots open. Well, it does mean we have 3 spots open. So
We do right now.
Yeah.
And the question is if we can keep them open.
Well, we should be able to keep two
we're
open.
going in one player short this year anyway, so we were
Yeah.
always going to leave a spot open for Cracker if he had a good enough pre-season.
Yep.
Maybe we can get Snelling to sit on Mitchell's shoulders, and then they'd almost be ruckman height.
Be fair. Maybe Snelling's secretly related to Trent Ormanell, he can ruck.
So if we pull 2 rookies up straight away for the season, can we bring in 2 new rookies?
No. Well, that's
Not
the big
currently,
debate
no.
at the moment. Not currently at the moment.
Well, that's ridiculous.
I think that's going to be subject to debate by Chris Davies, because I think that statement from the Commission on how they're going to lay out the penalties against Port Adelaide, which is realistically what they are, I think that is very challengeable, because it's not based in anything other than, that sounds right. And it's certainly disadvantageous to us and every other club that traded for an Essendon player.
Well, we're not guilty of anything, so
No, we're not.
we shouldn't be punished at all.
That's right.
And in fact, again, going back to Kosh's interview this afternoon, I mean, it sounds like we did absolutely everything we should do, or every step of the way. You know, we didn't give any bad advice. We said, hey, Essendon, take a deal. And so at every stage, everything we've said supported the fact that we should not have to suffer this punishment to the degree that we do. So even losing the player, that's going to suck regardless of what compensation we get. But the fact that there's all these cap penalties as well, and recruitment penalties, I mean, that's just too much. And that's all AFL, not WADA. So
Could we, if we were allowed to replace the 2 rookies, would we knock on Jared Redden's door and ask him to come back for a year? And would he come back?
I'd have him
I don't
back.
think his body's good enough to put up with the rigours of AFL football.
Yeah.
So we go Balderstone.
What about Giles?
Probably not. Giles is West Coast, isn't he?
Is he? Okay, I thought they recruited Giles to... must have misread that article. Sorry. Wasn't there something about SNFL players, AFL new recruits?
That might be Cameron Giles.
Yeah,
the
there we
Carlton
go.
centre half back.
That's no good then.
What about Warnock?
Look,
We
there's
could
guys
have-
out there.
Your man Warnock. Maybe we could have
Warnock and Logie
the
in
super
same
team.
side.
Logie and Warnock.
The battle of the. I could see who wins my debate of who's better.
That's it. All right. Well, on that note, I guess we'll say goodbye to you all. We'll be back good and proper in around about a month's time for the pre-season matches and ready for a big season in podcast world.
All right, guys.
All right.
I won't delay it anymore. Butcher!
Can't the pair.
Can't port.
The running Francis, it's deafening at Footy Park. It's like finals footy and Treadray marks at half forward. He's lifted as well, Treadray. 5 marks for him this afternoon. To the goal square. Chad Corns is the man of the moment. Can't do it this time. Stewie Jew. Right foot. Goal!